The first shot rang out just as Fiona Turner spotted the blood-soaked letter in her father's trembling hands. Montana Territory, 1876. A land of harsh beauty and harsher truths. The letter bore the official seal of the United States Army, and its message struck like a physical blow. Captain Wade Sutherland had fallen at Little Bighorn, presumed dead alongside General Custer and his men, in what the newspapers were already calling a massacre. "He can't be gone," Fiona whispered, her voice breaking as she snatched the letter from her father's grasp. Her auburn hair tumbled free from its pins as she shook her head in disbelief. "Wade promised he would return to me." Jeremiah Turner, weathered by years of frontier life, placed a calloused hand on his daughter's shoulder. "The Army doesn't make mistakes about these things, Fiona. Captain Sutherland fought bravely, but the Sioux—" "No!" Fiona crumpled the paper against her chest. Outside their modest homestead, the Montana sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and crimson, colors that reminded her too much of blood and fire. "They're wrong. Wade is coming back to me. He swore it." 3 months earlier, Wade had stood on this very porch, resplendent in his cavalry uniform, his dark eyes holding promises only she could see. "When I return," he'd said, "it will be forever now." He'd pressed a simple gold ring into her palm before mounting his horse and riding away toward destiny and battle. 6 weeks passed since the letter's arrival. Fiona moved through her days like a ghost, tending the vegetable garden, helping her father with the small herd of cattle, and teaching at the one-room schoolhouse in Willow Creek. Each evening she stood on the porch, searching the horizon as if her gaze alone could conjure Wade from the endless plains. "You can't keep doing this to yourself," said Martha Jenkins, the blacksmith's wife and Fiona's closest friend in the settlement. There were no survivors among Custer's men. "There were survivors from other companies," Fiona replied stubbornly. "The battle was chaos, men scattered, some might have escaped." Martha sighed. "It's been almost 2 months since Little Bighorn. If he was alive, he would have found a way to send word." Fiona turned away, unwilling to let her friend see the tears that threatened. "I would know if he was gone, Martha. I would feel it here." She pressed her hand against her heart, where Wade's ring hung on a leather cord, hidden beneath her dress. The schoolhouse bell rang clear across Willow Creek as Fiona dismissed her students for the day. Autumn had come to Montana, painting the cottonwoods along the creek in brilliant gold. She gathered her books and papers, thinking of the letter she would write tonight, another in the dozens she had penned to Wade since the news came. Letters she kept in a cedar box, waiting for the day she could place them in his hands. The clatter of hooves drew her attention to the street outside. A supply wagon had arrived from Fort Benton, bringing mail and goods to the isolated settlement. Fiona stepped onto the schoolhouse porch, watching as townsfolk gathered to hear news from the outside world. "Army's pushing hard against the Sioux," the wagon driver announced, handing parcels to the store owner. "Word is they're rounding up the last of the hostiles who fought with Sitting Bull. There's talk of sending them all to reservations down in Indian Territory." Fiona listened with half an ear as she made her way toward home. The war with the native tribes had been raging for years, flaring up whenever gold was discovered or settlers pushed into new territories. Wade had explained it all to her during their long walks along the creek. Unlike many soldiers, he'd spoken of the Indian nations with respect, admiring their horsemanship and courage even as duty compelled him to fight against them. "Miss Turner!" She turned to see young Jimmy Peterson running toward her, waving a folded paper. "The mail carrier asked me to bring this to you," the boy said, extending the letter. "Said it came special from Fort Lincoln." Her heart stuttered as she took the envelope, recognizing the official Army letterhead. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet inside. "It is with regret that we must inform you of an error in previous communications. Captain Wade Sutherland, 7th Cavalry, was not among those confirmed deceased at the Battle of Little Bighorn, but rather among those missing and presumed killed. Recent information suggests Captain Sutherland may have been taken prisoner. Investigation continues. You will be notified of any developments." Fiona pressed the letter to her chest, her breath coming in quick gasps. Alive. Wade might be alive. That night, she could scarcely sleep. If Wade had been taken prisoner by the Sioux or Cheyenne, what fate had befallen him? The newspapers printed lurid tales of torture and slow death, but other accounts told of white captives adopted into tribes, learning their ways, sometimes even refusing to return to white society when the opportunity arose. Dawn found her at the kitchen table, a map spread before her, tracing the distance between Willow Creek and the Dakota Territory where the battle had occurred. If Wade was alive, if he had somehow survived captivity, could he find his way back to her across hundreds of miles of wilderness? "You're planning something foolish," her father said, watching her from the doorway. "I can see it in your eyes, Fiona. The same look your mother had before she'd set her mind to something impossible." Fiona looked up, seeing the worry etched in the lines of his face. "I can't just wait here, Pa. Not now that there's hope." Jeremiah Turner shook his head. "What would you do? Ride alone into Sioux territory? The army's searching with hundreds of men. What could one woman do that they can't?" "I could recognize him," she said softly. "Even if he was changed by what he's endured, I would know him." Her father crossed the room and placed his hands on her shoulders. "Promise me you won't do anything rash. Your mother would haunt me from the grave if I let anything happen to you." Fiona covered his weathered hand with her own. "I promise I won't leave without telling you first." The following days brought increasing tensions to Willow Creek. News arrived that Chief Sitting Bull had fled north into Canada with his followers, while other Sioux bands were surrendering at various forts throughout the territory. Army patrols increased, passing through the settlement with greater frequency. Fiona continued teaching at the schoolhouse, but her mind constantly wandered to Wade. Each night she wrote in her journal, recording every scrap of news or rumor about survivors from the battle, prisoners taken, or warriors surrendering. If Wade was out there, she would compile the clues that might lead to him. October brought the first snowfall, a light dusting that melted by midday but served as a harbinger of the harsh winter to come. Fiona was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard riders approaching. 2 cavalry soldiers, their blue uniforms dusty from the trail, pulled up at the gate. "Miss Turner?" The older of the 2 dismounted and removed his hat. "Lieutenant Davis, Fort Ellis. We're making inquiries about Captain Sutherland." Fiona's heart leaped. "Have you found him?" The lieutenant's expression remained professionally neutral. "No, madam. But we've received reports from surrendering warriors who claim an army officer was taken alive from the battlefield. The description matches Captain Sutherland. I understand you were close to the captain." "We were to be married when he returned," Fiona said, lifting her chin. "Any information you have?" "We're gathering details for a possible recovery operation," Lieutenant Davis interrupted. "Anything you could tell us about identifying marks, personal effects he might have carried? It could help us confirm if the captive is indeed Captain Sutherland." Fiona invited the soldiers inside and spent an hour answering their questions. Wade had a scar on his left forearm from a childhood accident. He carried a pocket watch that had belonged to his grandfather, with their family crest engraved inside the cover. He spoke passable Lakota, having spent time with friendly scouts. "One last question," Lieutenant Davis said as they prepared to leave. "If we do locate Captain Sutherland, alive, but perhaps changed by his experience, would you still wish to be notified?" The question struck Fiona like a physical blow. "Changed? What do you mean?" The lieutenant exchanged glances with his companion. "Captives sometimes adopt tribal ways to survive, Miss Turner. Some even take Indian wives. Others suffer mental disturbances from their ordeal. I want to be notified regardless," Fiona said firmly, "no matter what condition he's in." After the soldiers departed, Fiona sat on the porch steps, watching the road long after they had disappeared from view. The possibility that Wade might have taken an Indian wife during his captivity burned like acid in her stomach. Would he have betrayed their love to save his own life? But then she remembered his eyes as he'd pressed the ring into her palm. "Forever now," he'd whispered. No, Wade would have remained faithful. And if he had been forced into actions against his will to survive, she would forgive him. All that mattered was bringing him home. 2 weeks later, Fiona was correcting student essays by lamplight when hoofbeats thundered up to the house. She opened the door to find a young private from the fort, his horse lathered from hard riding. "Miss Turner, Lieutenant Davis requests your presence at Fort Ellis immediately," he said, out of breath. "A patrol has brought in a white man found living among a band of Miniconjou Sioux. He won't speak, but he was carrying this." The soldier extended his hand, revealing a tarnished pocket watch. Fiona recognized it instantly. Wade's watch, is he? Alive, madam, but in poor condition. The lieutenant thought you might be able to identify him with certainty. I've brought a wagon for you. I'll get my father, Fiona said, her heart racing. We'll leave at once. The journey to Fort Ellis took most of the night, over rough trails illuminated only by moonlight and the wagon's swinging lantern. Fiona huddled under blankets beside her father, her mind whirling with hope and fear. What state would Wade be in? Would he recognize her? Would he still want her? Dawn was breaking as they passed through the fort's gates. Lieutenant Davis met them in the parade ground, his expression grave. He hasn't spoken a word since we found him, the officer explained as he led them toward the infirmary. The post surgeon says he's suffering from severe malnutrition and exposure. There are other signs of mistreatment. Has he responded to anything? His name? Mention of his regiment? Jeremiah asked. Nothing, sir. He watches everything, seems to understand what's happening around him, but won't or can't speak. The Indians who surrendered with him said he came to them half dead last summer. They treated his wounds and took him in. Outside the infirmary door, Lieutenant Davis paused. Miss Turner, I should warn you, he looks quite different from the captain you knew. Thinner, of course. His hair is long, and he's adopted some Indian ways. Please don't be alarmed. Fiona straightened her shoulders. I'm ready. The infirmary was warm and smelled of carbolic acid. Several beds held injured or ill soldiers, but Lieutenant Davis led them to a small private room at the rear. A guard stood outside the door, which he unlocked at the lieutenant's nod. The man inside sat on the edge of a narrow cot, staring out a small window. His back was to the door, his dark hair falling past his shoulders. He wore a soldier's trousers but no shirt, revealing a torso crisscrossed with scars both old and new. At the sound of the door, he turned. Fiona's hand flew to her mouth. His face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp beneath bronze skin. A ragged scar ran from his temple to his jaw on the left side. His once clean-shaven face now bore several weeks' growth of beard. But the eyes, those deep brown eyes that had looked at her with such tenderness, were unmistakably Wade's. Wade, she whispered, taking a step forward. Wade, it's me. It's Fiona. The man's eyes widened slightly. A flicker of something, recognition? Fear? Crossing his face before his expression shuddered again. Captain Sutherland, Lieutenant Davis said formally. Do you recognize this young woman? Wade stared at Fiona without expression, then slowly, deliberately, turned back to the window. He needs time, the post surgeon said from the doorway. Whatever he's been through, it's not uncommon for men to retreat into themselves after severe trauma. Fiona moved closer to the cot. Wade, please, look at me. When he didn't respond, she reached into her collar and pulled out the leather cord that held his ring. You gave me this, remember? You said, forever now. For a moment, she thought she saw his hands tremble, but still he did not turn. We'll leave you with him for a while, Lieutenant Davis said softly. Sometimes familiar faces can break through where military authority can't. After the others left, Fiona sat beside Wade on the cot, careful not to touch him. I never stopped believing you were alive, she said quietly. Even when they sent that letter, I knew, somehow. I felt you were still out there. She talked for nearly an hour, telling him about the school, about changes in Willow Creek, about her endless wait for news. He remained silent. But she noticed he no longer stared fixedly out the window. Instead, his gaze would occasionally flicker to her face or hands before darting away. I don't care what happened while you were gone, she said finally. I don't care what you had to do to survive. None of that matters. All that matters is you're alive, and I'm here, and we can face whatever comes next together. She reached out slowly, telegraphing her movement, and placed her hand palm up on the cot between them. An invitation, not a demand. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then, with excruciating slowness, Wade's hand moved, his fingers just brushing against hers. Fiona held her breath, afraid the slightest movement might shatter this fragile connection. Fiona? His voice was a rusty whisper, as if her name was the first word he'd spoken in months. Perhaps it was. Tears sprang to her eyes. Yes, Wade, I'm here. His fingers curled around hers, gripping with surprising strength. "They said, you would believe I was dead." "Who said that?" His expression clouded. "Men, Sioux warriors, after the battle, said no one would look for me if they thought I died with Custer. But I did look. I never stopped." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Stubborn." "Yes," she agreed, returning the smile through her tears. "Very stubborn, especially about you." They sat in silence for several minutes, hands still joined. Then Wade spoke again, his voice stronger. "I can't go back to what I was. Too much has happened." "I'm not asking you to go back," Fiona said. "Only forward, with me." The lieutenant returned an hour later to find them still sitting side by side, Wade speaking in halting sentences, Fiona listening intently. The officer looked surprised, then pleased. "Captain Sutherland," he said. "Good to hear your voice, sir." Wade looked up, his expression guarded once more. "Not captain anymore." "Well, technically, you're still commissioned. You've been carried on the rolls as missing, not dead. But we can discuss your status later. The surgeon wants to examine you again, if you'll permit it." Wade nodded slowly, then turned back to Fiona. "Will you stay?" "Of course," she promised. "I'm not going anywhere." Over the next few days, the story of Wade's ordeal emerged in fragments. He had been separated from his company during the chaotic battle, wounded by an arrow to the shoulder and a bullet that had grazed his head, leaving the scar on his face. Disoriented and bleeding, he had stumbled away from the fighting, eventually collapsing near a creek several miles from the battlefield. A mini Kanju hunting party had found him there, more dead than alive. Rather than killing him outright, they had taken him prisoner, treating his wounds. Their band had not participated in the battle, but they recognized his uniform and knew he was an enemy. "They kept me alive as leverage," Wade explained as he and Fiona walked slowly around the fort's parade ground, his strength returning day by day. "They thought they might be able to trade me for concessions if they were forced to surrender." "Why didn't they?" "Their band was constantly moving, trying to avoid army patrols. By the time they decided to surrender, I was just another mouth to feed. Some wanted to kill me then, but the medicine man said it would bring bad luck." Fiona shuddered at how close she had come to losing him forever. "And the watch? You managed to keep it all this time?" Wade nodded. "I convinced them it was sacred to me, like their medicine bundles. It was all I had left of home. Of you." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Fiona, I need to tell you everything before we go any further. There are things that happened." She placed her fingers gently against his lips. "Did you stop loving me?" "Never," he said fiercely. "Thoughts of you kept me alive, but I'm not the same man who rode away. I've seen things, done things." "So have I," she replied. "I'm not the same woman either. Grief changes you, fear changes you." Wade took her hand, pressing it against his scarred cheek. "There was a woman in the camp, the chief's daughter. She was assigned to guard me, bring me food. After a while, she taught me their language, their ways. It helped me survive." Fiona felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Were you and she?" "No," Wade said firmly. "Though she offered, and it might have improved my status in the band, but I couldn't. I had promised myself to you forever now, remember? But she became something like a friend. She's the one who convinced her father to let me keep the watch, the one who ultimately helped me come back to the army when the band surrendered." Relief washed through Fiona, followed immediately by shame at her doubt. "Thank you for telling me the truth." "Always," he said, his eyes holding hers. "No more secrets between us." As November deepened toward winter, Wade continued to recover physically, though nightmares frequently disrupted his sleep. The Army, after extensive debriefing about his captivity and knowledge of Sioux movements, granted him an honorable discharge with full pension, a rarity, but influenced by his status as one of the few officers to survive the Little Bighorn disaster. "What will you do now?" Lieutenant Davis asked as he handed over the discharge papers. Wade glanced at Fiona, who had scarcely left his side in the 3 weeks since her arrival at the fort. "Go home," he said simply. "To Willow Creek." They left Fort Ellis 2 days later, Wade riding a horse provided by the Army, Fiona, and her father, in their wagon laden with supplies. The journey would take several days, with the first snow of winter threatening on the horizon. "Are you sure about this?" Jeremiah asked Wade as they made camp the first evening. "Willow Creek's a small place. People will talk about where you've been, what happened to you." Wade stoked the campfire, his movements more confident each day. "Let them talk. I've faced worse than gossip." "And you, Fiona?" her father pressed. "The school board may not look kindly on their teacher marrying a man who lived among Indians." Fiona's chin lifted in that stubborn gesture Wade had come to know so well. "Then they can find another teacher. We'll make our own way." Wade reached for her hand across the fire. "I have my pension, and I know cattle. We could start a small ranch, build from there." "You've thought about this," Jeremiah observed. "Every day of my captivity," Wade confirmed. "Planning a future with Fiona kept me sane when everything else was chaos." They reached Willow Creek on a clear, cold afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the settlement. Word of their arrival spread quickly, and townsfolk emerged from stores and homes to stare at the man they had all believed dead, now returned with long hair and the bearing of someone forever changed by experience. Martha Jenkins was the first to approach, wrapping Fiona in a fierce hug before turning to Wade. "Captain Sutherland," she said, extending her hand formally. "Welcome home." Others followed, some genuinely pleased at his return, others clearly uncomfortable with the living reminder of the conflict that had claimed so many lives. Wade met each greeting with quiet dignity, neither apologizing for his survival nor elaborating on his time with the Sioux. That evening, gathered around the Turner family table, Wade finally asked the question that had been on his mind since Fort Ellis. "Fiona, are you certain about this? About me? Your father's right, there will be talk. Some folks will never accept what I've been through, who I am now." Fiona reached across the table for his hand. "Do you remember what you said to me the day you left? Not just forever now, but what came before it?" Wade's brow furrowed. "I said a lot of things that day. You said, 'The world is changing, Fiona. The West is changing. But some things remain constant, like my love for you.' Well, the world has changed for both of us, but my love for you remains constant too." The following Sunday, they attended church together, enduring the stares and whispers with united composure. The minister, to his credit, welcomed Wade warmly and spoke of redemption and homecoming in his sermon. Afterward, the school board chairman cornered Fiona outside the church. "Miss Turner, the board has concerns about recent developments. Your association with Captain Sutherland, given his unusual circumstances—" "Mr. Hawkins," Fiona interrupted calmly, "if you're suggesting my engagement to Captain Sutherland makes me unsuitable to teach, I'll save you the trouble of a board meeting and resign now." The chairman looked taken aback. Now, I didn't say that exactly. But there are parents who might object, the same parents who were happy to have me teach their children when they thought I was grieving my dead fiancé. How interesting that my happiness should be more controversial than my sorrow." Wade stepped to her side, his hand at the small of her back. "Mr. Hawkins, I understand your concerns, but I assure you, Fiona's judgment in choosing me reflects only her compassion and loyalty qualities you've valued in her as a teacher. If some find that objectionable, perhaps they should examine their own Christian charity." The chairman harumphed, clearly uncomfortable with being outmaneuvered. "Well, no decisions have been made yet. We'll discuss it at the next meeting." As he walked away, Wade turned to Fiona with a raised eyebrow. "That was rather forceful for a Sunday conversation." "I learned something while you were gone," she replied, tucking her hand into the crook of his arm. "Life's too short and too precious to waste time appeasing people who will never be satisfied." Winter settled over Montana territory with a vengeance, blanketing Willow Creek in deep snow and confining most residents to their homes and immediate surroundings. For Wade and Fiona, the enforced isolation was a blessing. Away from curious eyes and wagging tongues, they rebuilt their relationship one conversation, one touch, one shared moment at a time. Wade found work at the livery stable, his way with horses quickly earning the respect of the owner. Many of the townsmen, especially those who had served in the army themselves, gradually accepted his presence. The women took longer to come around, but Martha Jenkins led the way, pointedly inviting Fiona and Wade to dinner and serving notice to the gossips that she considered the couple entirely respectable. The school board, faced with the practical reality that qualified teachers were scarce on the frontier, decided Fiona could continue teaching so long as she and Wade maintained appropriate decorum, a condition that prompted much eye-rolling from Fiona, but which she accepted as the price of peace. By Christmas, they had settled into something approaching normalcy. Wade still suffered nightmares, still startled at unexpected noises, still sometimes drifted into Lakota phrases when tired or stressed. But he also laughed again, regained weight on his tall frame, and spoke with increasing confidence about their future. "I've been looking at that parcel of land west of town," he told Fiona, as they sat before the fire in her father's house on Christmas Eve. "The old Peterson claim. It's gone back to the territory for taxes, but it could be purchased for a reasonable sum. Good grazing land, with access to the creek." "For our ranch?" Fiona asked, leaning against his shoulder. "For our home," he corrected. "I thought we might start building in the spring. Be ready to move in by summer." She turned to face him, searching his eyes. "You're sure you're ready for that? For settling in one place after everything?" Wade took her hands in his. "I've wandered enough for one lifetime, Fiona. What I want now is roots, a home, a family." He hesitated, then added softly, "With you, if you still want that too." In answer, she kissed him, a gentle press of lips that deepened as he pulled her closer. When they broke apart, both breathless, she whispered, "I want that more than anything." The new year brought change to Willow Creek. The railroad surveyors came through, announcing that a spur line would be built within the next 2 years, connecting the settlement to the main Northern Pacific route. Property values soared overnight, and new businesses began to spring up in anticipation of the coming boom. Wade secured the Peterson land just in time, paying cash from his Army pension. He and Fiona spent every spare moment planning their home and future ranch. Her father, seeing their determination, offered to help with the building and contributed several head of cattle as an early wedding gift. "Have you set a date yet?" Martha asked one February afternoon as she and Fiona sorted through fabric at the general store. "Spring weddings are lovely, though you'll have your hands full with building the house at the same time." Fiona ran her fingers over a bolt of blue calico, imagining curtains for their new home. "We're thinking May, after school lets out for the summer. Wade wants to have the house at least partially finished first." Martha nodded approvingly. "Sensible man. Though, if you ask me, you've waited long enough already." "We have," Fiona agreed with a small smile. "But after coming so close to losing everything, a few more months seems a small price for doing things properly." The building began in March, as soon as the ground thawed enough for foundations to be dug. Wade worked alongside the hired carpenters every day after finishing at the livery, learning as he went. The design was modest but practical, 4 rooms to start, with space to expand as their family grew. April brought the first wildflowers and the first major setback. A late blizzard swept through the territory, dumping 2 feet of snow and stranding Wade at the half-built house for 3 days. When the storm finally cleared, Fiona and her father made their way out to the property, fearing the worst. They found Wade exhausted but triumphant. He had managed to protect the structure from serious damage, working through the night to shore up walls and clear snow from the partially finished roof. "I was worried sick about you," Fiona scolded as she unpacked the food she'd brought. "You could have frozen to death out here." Wade's smile was tired but genuine. "Takes more than a Montana blizzard to finish me off. Besides, I had good motivation to survive." He pulled her close, snow melting from his coat onto her dress. "I have promises to keep." By early May, the house was habitable, if not fully complete. The main living area and kitchen were finished, along with 1 bedroom. The 2nd bedroom and a small study would wait until after the wedding. The ceremony took place on the 3rd Saturday in May, with wildflowers decorating the small church and seemingly the entire population of Willow Creek in attendance. Whatever reservations some might still harbor about Wade's past, no one could deny the radiance of Fiona's happiness or the devotion evident in every look Wade gave her. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice carrying to the back of the packed church. Fiona, resplendent in a cream-colored dress that Martha and several other women had helped sew, could scarcely tear her eyes from Wade. He stood tall and straight in a new black suit, his hair trimmed shorter than he'd worn it since his return, but still longer than army regulations would have permitted. The scar on his face had faded to a silver line, visible but no longer angry. When it came time for their vows, Wade's voice rang out clear and confident. I, Wade Sutherland, take you, Fiona Turner, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part. Fiona repeated the traditional words, then added softly, so only Wade could hear, forever now. A smile of such tenderness crossed his face that tears sprang to her eyes. Forever now, he echoed. The celebration afterward spilled from the church to the town square, with tables of food and a fiddler playing dance tunes. Even those who had been most skeptical of Wade's return seemed caught up in the festive atmosphere. As twilight descended, Wade led Fiona away from the party toward the waiting buggy that would take them to their new home. Ready, Mrs. Sutherland? He asked, helping her up to the seat. I've been ready since the day you rode away, she replied, squeezing his hand. The house awaited them. Windows glowing with lamplight, Martha had gone ahead to light the lamps and stoke the fire. As the buggy pulled up to the front porch, Wade set the brake and turned to Fiona. Wait here a moment, he said, jumping down and coming around to her side. Before she could question him, he had lifted her into his arms. Wade, your shoulder is just fine, he assured her, carrying her up the steps and pausing at the threshold. I've dreamed of this moment, carrying you into our home, our life together. Fiona wound her arms around his neck, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them here. There were so many times I thought it would never happen. But it has. Wade pushed the door open with his foot and carried her inside. The main room was warm and welcoming, simple furniture arranged around the stone fireplace, shelves holding the few books and keepsakes they had collected, their home, their beginning. Gently, he set her on her feet, but kept his arms around her. There's something I need to say to you, Fiona. Something I should have said that day I rode away, but I was too focused on duty, too certain I'd have time later. She looked up at him, this man who had endured so much to return to her. What is it? I love you, he said simply. Not just as a promise for the future, but here and now. With everything I am, everything I've become, I love you. Fiona reached up to trace the line of his scar, this mark of all he had survived. And I love you, Wade Sutherland, the man who left, the man who returned, the man who stands before me now. All of you. Their kiss was a seal on those words, a promise renewed and deepened by all they had overcome. Later, as moonlight spilled through the bedroom window, Wade propped himself on one elbow, watching Fiona's peaceful face as she drifted towards sleep. Her auburn hair spread across the pillow, her hand resting on his chest over his heart. What are you thinking? She murmured, opening her eyes to find him studying her. That I'm the luckiest man alive, he answered truthfully. That every painful step of the journey was worth it, to be here with you now. She smiled sleepily. We have our whole lives ahead of us. Yes, he agreed, pulling her closer, and I plan to cherish every moment. Summer unfolded around their new life together. The house gradually became a home, with curtains at the windows and a vegetable garden taking root behind the kitchen. Wade completed the second bedroom and study, working in the long evening light after tending to their small but growing herd of cattle. Fiona continued teaching through the summer session, returning each day to add another domestic touch to their dwelling. In July, they hosted a small gathering to celebrate their first months of marriage. Jeremiah Turner, Martha and Thomas Jenkins, and a few other friends from town sat around the table Wade had built, enjoying Fiona's cooking and the sense of new beginnings. You've done well here, Jeremiah said, surveying the property as he and Wade stood on the porch after dinner. Better than I expected, if I'm being honest. Wade nodded, acknowledging the implied admission of earlier doubts. It helps to have a clear purpose, and good people willing to give a man a second chance. Jeremiah clapped him on the shoulder. You earned that chance. Not everyone would have fought so hard to come back from what you endured. Inside, Martha was helping Fiona clear the dishes. You're positively glowing, she observed. Married life clearly agrees with you. Fiona smiled, one hand unconsciously drifting to her midsection. Very much so. Martha's eyes widened. Fiona Turner Sutherland. Is there something you haven't told me? Shh, Fiona cautioned, glancing toward the door. Wade doesn't know yet. I only realized myself last week. I'm waiting for the right moment to tell him. Oh, my dear, Martha embraced her, mindful to keep her voice down. When do you think? February, if my calculations are correct. Our first winter in the house will be eventful. The right moment came 2 days later, as Wade and Fiona sat on their porch swing, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant orange and gold. Birds called from the cottonwoods along the creek, and a cool breeze carried the scent of wild roses and sage. I've been thinking, Wade said, his arm around her shoulders. We should add on to the house next spring, perhaps extend the kitchen, add another bedroom. Fiona turned to look at him, a smile playing at her lips. What an interesting coincidence. I've been thinking something very similar. Have you now? He raised an eyebrow. Great minds, it seems. Indeed. She took his hand and placed it gently over her still flat stomach. Though we might need that extra bedroom sooner than next spring. Wade went completely still, his eyes searching hers. Fiona, are you saying? We're going to have a baby, she confirmed, her voice soft with wonder. In February, the doctor thinks. For a moment, Wade seemed unable to speak. Then he pulled her into his arms, his face buried in her hair. A baby, he whispered. Our child. When he pulled back, Fiona was startled to see tears in his eyes. Wade, are you all right? More than all right, he assured her, brushing a tear away almost embarrassedly. It's just, during those months of captivity, there were times I was certain I would die without ever seeing you again, without a chance for the future we'd planned. And now, he placed his hand again on her stomach, reverent. Now life goes on. Our life. The news of the coming baby spread quickly through Willow Creek, met with genuine delight from most quarters. The school board, however, presented Fiona with an ultimatum: resign her position by Christmas or be dismissed. It's not fair, she fumed, pacing their living room after returning from the board meeting. Plenty of women work while expecting. I'm perfectly capable of teaching until much closer to the birth. Wade watched her from his chair by the fire, concern in his eyes. It's their loss, and perhaps a blessing in disguise. Winter travel to and from town would become difficult in your condition. That should be my choice to make, Fiona insisted. Not theirs? Of course it should, he agreed. But we knew this community had certain rigid expectations. This is just one more example. Fiona sighed, her anger deflating. You're being very rational about this. One of us should be, he said with a small smile. Besides, I've learned to pick my battles carefully. Some fights aren't worth the cost. She crossed the room to perch on the arm of his chair. When did you get so wise, Captain Sutherland? He pulled her onto his lap, his hand automatically finding the slight swell of her belly. Around the time, I realized how much I had to lose by being foolish. October brought cattle buyers from the east, offering good prices for healthy stock, to rebuild herds decimated by recent harsh winters. Wade sold half their small herd, using the profits to order supplies for the coming winter and to commission proper furniture for the baby's room from the town carpenter. You're doing well for newcomers to the ranching business, observed Thomas Jenkins as he helped Wade load supplies into their wagon. Most folks struggle their first few years. We're starting small and building carefully, Wade replied, and we're fortunate to have good neighbors willing to share advice. Thomas nodded appreciatively. Martha's been collecting baby things for Fiona. Seems our youngest has outgrown his cradle, and she's determined your little one should have it. That's very generous. Please thank her for us. Thank her yourself at the harvest dance next week. You and Fiona are coming, aren't you? Wade hesitated. Large gatherings still made him uncomfortable at times, a lingering effect of his captivity. I'm not sure Fiona should be dancing in her condition. Thomas laughed. Try telling her that. Martha danced until she could barely waddle with all three of ours. Women are stronger than we give them credit for. The harvest dance, held in the newly constructed town hall, proved to be a turning point for Wade's place in the community. As he and Fiona entered, several people called greetings, making space for them near the refreshment table. The school board chairman, who had been so concerned about Fiona's marriage and pregnancy, approached with an awkward attempt at reconciliation. Mrs. Sutherland, We've found a replacement teacher for the spring term, but she can't arrive until January. The board was wondering if you might consider staying on until Christmas after all. For the children's sake, of course." Fiona, resplendent in a blue dress, altered to accommodate her growing belly, exchanged glances with Wade. "I'll consider it, Mr. Hawkins, for the children's sake." Later, as fiddle music filled the hall and couples whirled in a lively reel, Wade led Fiona in a more sedate waltz, mindful of her condition. "You're enjoying this," she observed, noting the relaxed set of his shoulders, the ease in his smile. "I am," he admitted, sounding almost surprised. "It feels normal, like we're just another couple in the community." "Isn't that what we are?" His eyes grew distant for a moment. "Sometimes I still expect to wake up and find myself back in that Sioux camp, or in the infirmary at Fort Ellis. Like all of this, you, the baby, our home is just a dream my mind created to escape reality." Fiona squeezed his hand. "This is reality, Wade. We made it." As winter descended on Montana, Wade worked tirelessly to ensure their home was prepared. He split endless cords of firewood, stocked the root cellar with provisions, and reinforced the barn where their remaining cattle would shelter from the worst of the weather. Fiona, now showing prominently in her 6th month, divided her time between teaching and preparing for the baby. She sewed tiny garments in the evenings, arranged and rearranged the nursery, and read every book on childbirth and infant care she could obtain most, sent by Wade's sister from St. Louis, after receiving news of the coming niece or nephew. December brought the heaviest snow in years, isolating their homestead for days at a time. After Fiona's last day of teaching before Christmas, a blizzard closed the road to town entirely. They celebrated the holiday quietly, just the two of them before their fireplace, exchanging simple gifts and making plans for the baby's arrival. "Boy or girl?" Wade asked, his hand spanning Fiona's rounded belly, where their child kicked vigorously. "Girl," Fiona said with certainty. "She's too active to be anything else." Wade laughed. "Because boys are naturally sedate?" "Because she's impatient to meet her father," Fiona corrected, covering his hand with hers, "just like her mother was." New Year's Day, 1878, dawned clear and bitterly cold. Wade rose early to tend the livestock, returning to find Fiona already up and making breakfast, humming softly as she worked at the stove. "You should be resting," he admonished, stamping snow from his boots. "Doctor's orders." "I'm restless," she admitted. "And hungry. Your daughter demands pancakes." "My daughter, is it? I thought we agreed not to be certain." Fiona's smile was serene. "A mother knows these things." Later that day, as dusk approached, they heard the sound of horse hooves crunching through snow. Wade went to the door, rifle in hand, a precaution born of frontier life and hard experience. "It's the doctor," he called to Fiona, setting the rifle aside. "And your father with him." The men stomped into the house, bringing a blast of cold air and news from town. "Railroad surveyors are stuck at the hotel," Jeremiah reported as he warmed his hands by the fire. "Say they'll be pushing the line through faster than expected. Willow Creek's going to grow considerably this coming year." Dr. Miller, after greeting them both, turned his attention to Fiona. "And how is our mother to be? Any discomfort? Swelling?" "Just impatience," Fiona replied, "and some trouble sleeping. The baby seems to dance all night and sleep all day." "That's normal," the doctor assured her, opening his bag. "Let's have a proper look at you while I'm here, save you the trip into town next week." The examination confirmed all was progressing as it should. "Another 6 weeks, I'd say," Dr. Miller pronounced, "though first babies sometimes take their time. Keep walking daily, but don't overexert yourself." After the doctor and Jeremiah departed, Wade found Fiona in the nursery, arranging tiny folded garments in the chest of drawers. 6 more weeks, she mused. It seems both forever and no time at all. Wade wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands cradling her belly. "Are you scared?" She leaned back against him. "A little." "Aren't you?" "Terrified," he admitted. "Not of the baby, but of being responsible for this new life, of being the father our child deserves." Fiona turned in his embrace to face him. "You will be. I have absolute faith in that." February arrived with a brief thaw that turned the snow to slush before freezing again. making travel treacherous. Fiona's time grew near, and Wade found himself watching her constantly for signs of labor, much to her amused exasperation. "The baby will come when it's ready," she told him, as she kneaded bread dough one morning. "Staring at me won't speed things along." "I just want to be prepared," he said, not looking away. "The doctor said first babies can come quickly sometimes." Fiona laughed. "He also said they often take their sweet time. Relax, Wade. Everything is ready." 2 nights later, Fiona woke at midnight with the first contractions. She lay still for several minutes, timing the sensations before gently shaking Wade awake. "It's starting," she whispered, her voice steady despite the flutter of fear in her chest. Wade was instantly alert, lighting the lamp and pulling on his clothes. "How far apart?" "About 20 minutes. We have time." He nodded, his military training asserting itself in the face of crisis. "I'll get the water heating, then ride for the doctor and your father." "Wade," Fiona caught his hand as he rose. "Be careful on the road. It's icy and it's dark. We have hours yet." He bent to kiss her forehead. "I'll be careful, and I'll be back as quickly as possible. Do you want Martha to come too?" "Yes, please. And Wade?" She squeezed his hand. "We're going to meet our baby today." The wonder in her voice steadied him, transforming anxiety into purpose. "Yes, we are." The road to town was indeed treacherous, ice glistening in the moonlight. Wade rode carefully, but with determination, reaching Willow Creek just as the first hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky. He roused the doctor first, then Jeremiah, and finally made his way to the Jenkins home. Martha answered his knock, already dressed despite the early hour. "Fiona?" she asked simply. "In labor," Wade confirmed. "Started around midnight." "I'll be right with you. Thomas, get the children up and feed them. I may be gone all day." She disappeared briefly, returning with a basket of supplies. "Let's go. First babies often take their time, but we shouldn't dawdle." The small party made better time returning to the ranch, the growing daylight revealing the safest path across the frozen landscape. Wade's anxiety grew with every passing minute, imagining Fiona alone and in pain. They arrived to find her walking slowly around the main room, one hand braced against her lower back. "Your timing is perfect," she greeted them, relief evident in her voice. "Things are progressing more quickly than I expected." The next hours passed in a blur for Wade. Banished from the bedroom by Martha and the doctor, he paced the living room with Jeremiah, jumping at every sound from behind the closed door. "She's strong, my Fiona," Jeremiah said, watching Wade with understanding. "Takes after her mother that way. She'll come through this fine." "I know," Wade said, though his voice betrayed his worry. "I just hate not being able to help her, after everything to be useless now." "You're not useless," Jeremiah corrected. "You're doing exactly what she needs, giving her space to bring your child into the world while making sure she has the best care possible. That's what a good husband does." The sun had reached its zenith when a new sound pierced the air, the thin, outraged cry of a newborn. Wade froze mid-pace, his eyes flying to the bedroom door. Long moments passed before it opened, revealing Dr. Miller with a smile on his tired face. "Congratulations, Captain Sutherland. You have a daughter. Mother and child are both doing well." Wade moved as if in a dream, following the doctor into the bedroom. Martha was cleaning up, while Fiona lay propped against pillows, a small bundle cradled in her arms. Her face was flushed, her hair damp with perspiration, but her eyes shone with a joy Wade had never seen before. "Wade," she said softly, "come meet your daughter." He approached the bed cautiously, overwhelmed by the moment. Fiona tilted the bundle so he could see the tiny face within, pink cheeks, a button nose, wisps of dark hair. "She's perfect," he whispered, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "Absolutely perfect, like her mother." "Would you like to hold her?" Fiona asked. Wade hesitated. "What if I do it wrong?" "You won't," she assured him. "Just support her head." With infinite care, he took the swaddled infant from Fiona's arms. The baby squirmed, her tiny face scrunching briefly before relaxing again. Wade felt something profound shift within him as he held his daughter, a fierce protectiveness, a love so overwhelming it nearly stopped his breath. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I'm your father." The baby's eyes opened slightly, dark blue and unfocused. One tiny hand escaped the blanket, fingers spreading like a starfish. "She needs a name," Fiona said, watching them with tender eyes. Wade nodded, still gazing at his daughter. "What do you think of Eleanor, after your mother?" "Eleanor," Fiona repeated, tasting the name. "It's beautiful. Eleanor Hope Sutherland." "Hope?" Wade looked up, questioning. "Because she represents everything we hoped for during those dark months when we were separated. Everything we've built together since." Wade's throat tightened with emotion. "Eleanor Hope, it's perfect." The next weeks passed in a haze of joy and exhaustion. Eleanor proved to be a good baby, nursing well, and sleeping in 3-hour stretches that gradually lengthened. Wade discovered in himself a patience he hadn't known he possessed, walking the floor with his daughter in the small hours when Fiona needed rest, marveling at her perfect fingers and toes, at the way she seemed to grow and change daily. Spring came early that year, the snow melting by mid-March to reveal tender green shoots pushing through the soil. As the land renewed itself, Wade and Fiona settled into their new life as parents, finding rhythms that accommodated both Eleanor's needs and the demands of the ranch. On a mild April evening, Wade returned from checking the cattle to find Fiona on the porch with Eleanor. The baby, now 2 months old, lay on a blanket while Fiona read aloud from a book of poetry. "Starting her education early, I see," Wade observed, dropping a kiss on Fiona's head before kneeling to greet his daughter. Eleanor responded with a toothless smile that never failed to melt his heart. "It's never too early for Wordsworth," Fiona replied, marking her place in the book. "Besides, she just likes the sound of voices. She doesn't care if it's poetry or cattle prices." Wade stretched out beside the blanket, propping himself on one elbow to gaze at his daughter. "She has your eyes," he noted, not for the first time. The baby's eyes had lightened from newborn blue to a clear hazel that matched Fiona's exactly. "And your stubborn chin," Fiona countered with a smile. "Heaven help us when she starts forming opinions of her own." Wade laughed, reaching out to let Eleanor grasp his finger in her tiny fist. "I have something to tell you," he said, his tone shifting to seriousness. "I received a letter today from Fort Lincoln. They're still sorting through accounts of what happened at Little Bighorn. They want me to come testify about what I saw, what I learned during my captivity." Fiona's smile faded. "When?" "Next month. I'd be gone about 3 weeks." He watched her face carefully. "I don't have to go. I can write that it's impossible with the ranch and the baby." She was quiet for a long moment, then shook her head. "No, you should go. It's important for the historical record, for closure, for whatever justice can still be served." "You're sure? I hate to leave you alone with Eleanor." "We'll manage," Fiona assured him. "My father can stay with us. And it's only 3 weeks." She reached across the blanket to touch his face. "I'm not afraid of you leaving anymore, Wade. I know you'll come back to us." The night before his departure for Fort Lincoln, Wade sat in the rocking chair in Eleanor's room, his daughter sleeping peacefully against his chest. The window was open, allowing the sweet scent of spring flowers to drift in on the breeze. "I'll miss seeing how much you change while I'm gone," he whispered to the sleeping infant. "You'll probably be trying to crawl by the time I get back." Fiona appeared in the doorway, her expression tender as she watched them. "She'll still know you," she said softly. 3 weeks isn't so long." "It seems like forever," Wade admitted. "I've never been away from her since she was born." "All the more reason for you to go now, while she's too young to truly notice your absence. Better than when she's older and would feel it more keenly." Wade nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in her words. "You always see the practical side of things." "One of us has to," she teased, crossing to take Eleanor from his arms. "Come to bed. You have an early start tomorrow." Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Wade pulled Fiona close against him. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "For what?" "For believing in me, for waiting, for giving me Eleanor, for making a home with me, for everything." Fiona turned in his arms to face him, her expression serious in the dim moonlight filtering through the curtains. "You don't need to thank me for loving you, Wade. It's as natural as breathing. Not everyone would have held on through what we endured. Not everyone finds what we have," she countered. "Some people go their whole lives without this kind of love. She leaned forward to kiss him softly. "Besides, you came back to me, just like you promised." Wade's departure the next morning was emotional but controlled. He kissed Eleanor's downy head, inhaling her sweet baby scent, as if to store it in memory. Then he turned to Fiona, pulling her into a fierce embrace. 3 weeks, he promised. No longer. "We'll be here," she assured him, standing straight and dry-eyed as he mounted his horse. Safe and waiting. The journey to Fort Lincoln was uneventful, the spring weather favorable for travel. Wade found the military outpost much as he remembered it, though many faces had changed. Few of the officers who had ridden out with Custer remained. Those who did regarded Wade with a mixture of respect and curiosity, the man who had survived when so many others perished. His testimony before the inquiry board took several days. Wade recounted everything he could remember about the battle, the confusion, the separation of companies, the overwhelming numbers of warriors. He described what he had observed during his captivity, the movements of bands, the discussions among leaders, the gradual dispersal of forces in the face of army pursuit. "And in your opinion, Captain Sutherland," asked the senior officer presiding over the inquiry, "could the disaster have been averted?" Wade considered his answer carefully. "With better reconnaissance, perhaps. With more respect for the fighting capabilities of the Sioux and Cheyenne, almost certainly. With less impetuosity on the part of certain commanders, definitely." The officer nodded gravely. "Thank you for your candor, Captain. Your insights are valuable to our understanding of the events of that day." In the evenings, Wade wrote long letters to Fiona, describing his days, expressing his longing for her and Eleanor, planning their future. "The railroad will reach Willow Creek by autumn," he wrote. "We should consider expanding our herd next spring. With easier access to markets, cattle prices are sure to rise." The 3 weeks passed more quickly than he had feared, filled with debriefings, meetings with various officials, and the drafting of his official report. By the time he was cleared to return home, Wade felt he had discharged his final duty to the Army and his fallen comrades. Now, his only obligations were to his wife, his daughter, and their life together. The journey home seemed both endless and swift. As the familiar landscape of Willow Creek came into view, Wade felt a lightness in his spirit that had been absent during his time away. This was home now, not the eastern city where he had been raised, not the army posts where he had served, but this small Montana settlement and the ranch beyond it, where Fiona and Eleanor waited. He rode up to their property as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the land. The house looked exactly as he had left it, smoke rising from the chimney, the new spring garden showing green shoots in neat rows. As he approached, the front door opened and Fiona stepped onto the porch, Eleanor in her arms. Wade dismounted and crossed the yard in long strides, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. Fiona's smile was radiant as he reached them, enfolding both his wife and daughter in a tight embrace. "Welcome home," Fiona whispered against his chest. Wade pulled back just enough to look at Eleanor, who stared at him with wide, curious eyes. For a heart-stopping moment, he feared she might not remember him. Then her face broke into a gummy smile, and she reached for him with pudgy hands. "She remembers me," he said, voice thick with emotion, as he took her from Fiona's arms. "Of course she does," Fiona replied. "I told her about you every day. Showed her your picture, made sure she knew her father would always come back to her." Later that evening, after Eleanor was settled in her crib, Wade and Fiona sat on the porch swing, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. His arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him, they savored the simple joy of being together again. "Was it difficult?" Fiona asked. "Reliving that day, telling the story over and over?" Wade considered the question. "Less than I expected. Time has not healed it exactly, but put it in perspective. It's part of my past, not my present, not my future." He tightened his arm around her. "This is my future, you and Eleanor, this land, the life we're building." Fiona smiled up at him. "And what a life it will be." As if to confirm her words, a shooting star streaked across the heavens, leaving a trail of light against the velvet darkness. Wade watched it disappear, then turned to his wife with a smile that held all the love and promise of their shared tomorrows. "Forever now," he whispered, and sealed the vow with a kiss.